going to see today. My warm gratitude to the people of Japan who helped so much in making this completely unique film. Traveling in Japan, shooting in Japan, Kyoto, Nara, so many Koyasan, so many places, is not easy, especially for somebody who does not know the Japanese language. And the yoga community came forward enormously to make this possible. Keiko Ito, who I can never thank enough, is a very senior translator, interpreter in Japan. She does the international Formula One races and so many other things every year. And she is a yoga practitioner and a Jyotish. So when Swami Sita Ramananda ji of the Shivananda group informed her that I was going to come to Japan and shoot, and would she help? Keiko came forward in the spirit of Karma Yoga. I mean, for she entirely gave of herself. She so many days, a few weeks, in fact. She put herself entirely at the disposal of the shooting, from early morning to late night. And even at night, she used to go home and do further internet research so as to be able to very accurately translate for me at all the temples that we would visit the next day. Thoroughgoing professional, absolutely wonderful woman. And what a contribution to the making of this film. And then young Chisato Nakayama, another practitioner of yoga who lives in the north of Japan. When she came to know that I, who she had seen shooting yoga at the Shivananda ashram in Kerala, was going to come to Japan, she wrote to me and offered that she will come to whichever part of Japan that I was going to, in the spirit of Karma Yoga, all at her own cost, mind you. And she would put herself at the disposal of the shooting to do everything for us, which she did so warmly, so kindly, so lovingly. She was like a wonderful little daughter. But I must say that the Japanese people, they do everything with a perfection. It is Karma Yoga taken to its ultimate. They are thoughtful in the moment, every single moment. And doing it for me is even more difficult because I have so many restrictions in my food. I do not eat chili of any kind at all. I don't eat anything or drink anything cold. There's so many things like that. And in every moment, looking after the whole shooting, looking after me, these people are great examples of how human beings can be. They are absolutely wonderful, the Japanese people. And not to forget that even the Japanese people we met on the street every day, even taxi drivers and so many others, absolutely amazing people. You know, if we think that Indians are courteous or Indians used to be courteous, the Japanese are courteous to a much greater degree. The qualities that we consider Indian, I would say the Japanese are much more Indian than us in the best of our qualities. So every day of shooting this film in Japan was like a treat. Every moment, every interaction would put a smile on our faces. But then, most of all, I must thank the chief priests of the Japanese temples who made this unique film possible. Because Japanese temples and Japanese priests do not normally, do hardly ever do they in fact give interviews or open their doors for the shooting of their deities. And it is becoming a long introduction. I will not carry it further, but I would say that it's an absolutely unique instance where they came forward And they completely opened their doors to make this shooting possible, to be able to get this film to you. In fact, the director of the Japan Foundation in Delhi, he was telling the audience when this exhibition and film screening occurred at the India International Center 1 year ago. He was telling the audience that we Japanese do not get to see the deities that you are getting to see. So, with the love, affection, and help of so many people, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me the greatest of happiness to bring before you this film, Hindu deities worshipped in Japan. And here I must say that most thanks go to Sujata Chatterjee, my partner, the associate director of this film, who has deeply helped me in every moment with the research and with everything else. So it gives us the greatest pleasure. And Avantika, may I request you to run the film, please? Thank you so much. Along with the ideas of Buddhism and
We started from the beginning, Shruti.
use the optimized video, start the film again, optimize for video sharing, and start the video again, please. Along with the ideas of Buddhism and Hinduism, the culture of Indian deities traveled across the whole of Asia. Please, to the side of the screen where you share, the option comes up, optimize for video sharing. Then it will stop.
Very interesting.
Yes, I'll just.
Yes, please, and start it from the beginning.
Yes, I'll start it from.
Along with the ideas of Buddhism and Hinduism, the culture of Indian deities traveled across the whole of Asia.
Very interestingly, more than 80% of Japanese gods are originally Indian gods.
This close relationship between the people of India and Japan has not been known to most people. Well-researched books on the subject are also not available.
Most of Japanese don't know. For example, I live in Kichijoji, in the outskirts of Tokyo. This Kichijoji literally means temple of Kisho goddess. And Kisho is originally Lakshmi. So thus, I came from Lakshmi town. This should be recognized by Japanese people, the bottom of Japanese culture. Indian culture is very strongly imprinted and developed in the Japanese way.
The Todaiji temple at Nara is one of the oldest and most revered temples of Japan. The 48 feet high Vairochana here is the largest bronze statue in the world.
Already in the 8th century, Indian Buddhist monk named Bodhisena has arrived to Japan, and he inaugurated the eye-opening the ceremony of Great Buddha of Todaiji Temple in 752.
Bodhisena and Sira, they then went to a temple nearby Dayanji where they started the teaching of Sanskrit in Japan for the first time.
When the Japanese studied Sanskrit in the 8th and 9th centuries, Sanskrit was synonymous with the Siddham script. This was used for writing Sanskrit since the 5th century in India.
Thus, Japan and India was very closely connected.
Avantika, are you running it? Have you downloaded it in your computer? Hello, Avantika.
Yeah, hi.
Is it downloaded in your computer or are you trying to run it through the internet?
It's running through the internet.
No, you should never do that. It'll only take you a moment. Please download it in your computer and take it up from here.
Sure. We are
So there's a little glitch. We'll be back in a moment. Please bear with us. The film will be re-screened in just a moment. So please bear with us for a moment. In the little time that we watched a little bit of the film, it's already unfolding. It's a relation for us. Even though personally I've been so much into Indian teaching, into the symbolic so far has been quite a revelation, and there's a little technical glitch. So please bear with us. We'll be back really soon with the film again. In the meantime, maybe while the film is being loaded back, Binoyji, if you'd like to say something more of what we've already watched. It was interesting to see the name of Lakshmi changing to
Yes,
come
we
back.
are having a problem with running the film, so I'll come back on, and and I will just say that
We've
yes,
had quite an
Bhushan is
interesting
there, Lakshmi is there,
journey
Shiva
through the
is there.
festival of discovery of
Your image hasn't come in.
Mm.
But will you also take a picture? Quite later, we will
Are you getting my voice and image?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, okay, okay. So I was
not the image.
not the. I have started it here, but
Yeah, yeah. Now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's Ajay.
So,
Yeah.
so while we are overcoming the technical problem in running the film, I'll talk somewhat more. And this cultural connect is in fact not limited just to India and Japan. As a matter of fact, as this film will also show you, much of what reached Japan from India went through Vietnam. Vietnam, for about 1400 years, was a very great seafaring Hindu kingdom. And Champa Kingdom is what it was called, and was responsible for the spread of Indian culture to many parts of Southeast Asia. In fact, when Sujata and I have been shooting and documenting yoga in Vietnam, we also made the discovery that after the Buddha, the next most revered deity of Vietnam is in fact an Indian teacher. You see, people know about Bodhidharma, the great founder of Chan Buddhism in China, which went from China to Japan and became Zen Buddhism in Japan. And most people sort of take it for granted that Bodhidharma would have gone along the land Central Asian Silk Route on his journey from India. He was most probably at Kanchipuram to China. Now, actually, Bodhidharma took the sea route, and there are records of Bodhidharma in various Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia. And then from there, he went to Champa, Vietnam. And till today, there are hundreds of temples dedicated to Bodhidharma in Vietnam. He's a deeply revered Indian teacher of Vietnam. And from there, he went on to China. So once you start studying it, of course, talking about Vietnam, I should mention the fact that in 1994-95, I documented all the Hindu temples of Vietnam, including rediscovering Hindu temples going back to the 6th century. So once you start getting into it, you realize that this culture was all pervasive, completely. And the best part of it is that it was a great ethical culture. It did not spread through any force. It did not spread through the use of a sword. It spread only because when people came across this culture, Indian philosophy, they wanted it. They wanted to embrace it. There are great examples of this embrace of culture. How many people are aware that the most important name in Chinese Buddhism, Kumarajiva, was actually the son of an Indian in the in the 3rd century. In fact, an Indian called Kumarayana was traveling across Central Asia when the king of Kucha heard that there was an Indian who was near his kingdom. And as used to happen at that time, and this is something you must keep firmly in your minds, this was the situation, the position of Indians. And why was this position given to Indians? Because of Indian philosophy. Indian philosophy was found so beautiful, everybody wanted to hear it. So when the king of Kucha heard that an Indian was on the road, on the highway, he came out of his kingdom. He went with his retinue, went and received this Indian who was Kumarayana. He brought him back to the palace. He made him his guru. And he also asked Kumarayana to please marry his daughter, Princess Jiva. They married, and their son was eventually called Kumara Jiva, based upon the names of Kumarayana and Princess Jiva. Princess Jiva took young Kumara Jiva to Kashmir, where for 13 years he studied Sanskrit and Buddhist scriptures. On his return to Kucha, he became immensely famous for beautifully translating Sanskrit scriptures, Buddhist scriptures. As a matter of fact, it is said that China attacked Kucha and annexed it because of the importance of Kumarajiva, of the Indian background who was there. In fact, China has many temples, even to the white horse which Kumarajiva sat upon. So this is the kind of deep cultural connections and the spread of culture which occurred in ancient times. And by now, maybe the film has been downloaded and is ready to be screened. Avantika, is the film ready to be screened now?
Binoy, hi. So we are not able to download.
Sorry, I can't hear
No,
you.
I think we will have to proceed with playing it through the internet because of the slow internet connectivity in this region. It's not getting downloaded.
Right.
We've tried many times since the morning. So can we please continue it on the internet? I know the quality won't be that good, but
No.
if you allow us, we will just go ahead with it.
But of course, please go ahead.
Sorry, you're on mute.
I'm not on mute.
Sorry.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead, and thank you very much. Please go ahead, and thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Binoy, I can hear you. I can hear
Yes.
you.
Yes.
I understand. I'm just telling this.
Move the start again once you move the slide. Put it full screen and start again.
Please don't take it from the beginning. It'll take too long. If you can take it from that place. where we were.
Put it high deep.
Along with the ideas of Buddhism and Hinduism, the culture of Indian deities traveled across the whole of Asia.
Very interestingly, more than 80% of the Japanese god are originally Indian god.
This close relationship between the people of India and Japan has not been known to most people. Well-researched books on the subject are also not available.
Most of the Japanese don't know. For example, I live in Kichijoji, in the outskirts of Tokyo. This Kichijoji literally means temple of Kisho, goddess. And the Kisho is originally Lakshmi. So thus, I came from Lakshmi town. This should be recognized by Japanese people, the bottom of Japanese culture. Indian culture is very strongly imprinted and developed in the Japanese way.
The Todaiji temple at Nara is one of the oldest and most revered temples of Japan. The 48 feet high Vairochana here is the largest bronze statue in the world.
Already in the 8th century, Indian Buddhist monk named Bodhisena has arrived to Japan, and he inaugurated the eye-opening ceremony of Great Buddha of Todaiji Temple in 752.
Bodhisena and Buddhasthira, they then went to a temple nearby Dayanji where they started the teaching of Sanskrit in Japan for the first time.
When the Japanese studied Sanskrit in the 8th and 9th centuries, Sanskrit was synonymous with the Siddham script. This was used for writing Sanskrit since the 5th century in India.
Thus, Japan and India was very closely connected. If you go to Japanese tomb, you find sit-down letters. No Japanese can read these letters written on the tomb timber. And again in Japan, there is a Koya-san temples. In this Koya-san temples, they have still sit-down Sanskrit, the school. Many monks are learning this Sanskrit, but Sanskrit is sit-down letters. Perhaps is Japan is a time capsule of Indian culture. Already in India disappeared.
There is a deep relationship between Kana, the Japanese alphabet, and Sanskrit. The Japanese wrote Sanskrit through simplified Chinese characters, which developed into the Japanese alphabet, Kana.
And this Japanese, the alphabet, pronouns, A, I, U, E, O, like Sanskrit, exactly as the Sanskrit.
In Japan, they also use the Indian letters for writing of sacred syllables or bijaksharas, which have the power of mantras. Every Buddhist monastery in Japan has a seal in which there is a bijakshara, a sacred syllable, as a short name of the monastery. There are some words in Japanese which are derived from Sanskrit, like O Seva, from Seva, service. And there are about 100 Sanskrit words which are used in Japanese.
Most of the Japanese, they are using that, but without knowing that that is the originally from Sanskrit. Suppose like they call the Buddhist temples at Thera. Thera means it is from the Pali term Thera, means a Buddhist monk, a bhikshu having 10 years experience.
In the words of His Excellency Mr. Yasukuni Inoki, as I come from the Japanese Lakshmi town, it is no great surprise to me to find that Japanese life is full of so many Hindu deities. Japanese people are unaware of their origins. One of the most revered deities of Japan is Saraswati. There are scores of shrines built to her. In many ways, the original concept of Saraswati and her association with the natural order and good fortune are very well preserved in Japan. She is often visualized as a sacred body of water. In Japan, we find the continuance of so many early ideas of Indian philosophy. The annals of the Todaiji temple mention that the celebration of the worship of Lakshmi and Saraswati was held for the first time in this temple in 722 AD. Ever since, it has been an annual celebration. In 1836, Saito Sachio wrote a guidebook to the Edo area or modern Tokyo. Saraswati was mentioned as the most popular deity here at that time. In 1934, Lady Chiban Sonyo felt that she had become an incarnation of Saraswati. She started writing in Sanskrit, though she had never studied the language. She founded the Benten Shu Saraswati sect. This sect holds water as divine, as it is the abode of Saraswati. We are reminded that Saraswati is the personification of the great river which once flowed in India. Benten Shu also worships her to bestow eloquence and learning. Worship of Lakshmi was done to ensure the peace of the land, wind and rain in good season, good harvests, joy of the people, and the good of all sentient beings. The great intellectual genius of Japan was Kukai or Kobo Daishi of the 9th century. He learned the Sanskrit script from the Kashmiri Acharya Pragnya.
Kopo Daishi placed emphasis on a knowledge of Sanskrit. He said that the Japanese have had to rely upon translations to study Buddhism. However, the true words in the original language are exceedingly important. Every word has a profound meaning.
で、その時の神に拝む
The Japanese people use Sanskrit when they pray. Suppose in Sanskrit they say, Om Saraswati Swaha. In Japanese it becomes Om Saraswati Ke Swaka.
オンサラスバテイエイソワカというその礼拝の仕方も
In Japan, they are preserving the old Indian tradition because they are following the ancient scriptures. They are also doing the puja and the mudras as well as the sadhana.
ムドラですね。ムドラをしてそして
There is nothing called Japanese or Japanese elements in these. It is the Indian Buddhist tantric tradition.
ストートなのもありますそれを持って礼拝して
The Vajrayana Buddhist traditions of Japan trace their knowledge back to India, to Nagarjuna and other great acharyas of the Nalanda University.
Nagarjuna is known as Gujio in Japan. Without his teaching, the Buddhism of the great vehicle would not have existed.
The Lotus Sutra is a major spiritual creation with a profound impact on life in Japan. It was translated from the Sanskrit by Kumara Jiva 1600 years ago.
特に比叡山は
This is a temple that follows the Lotus Sutra. The sutra is originally from India and goes back to the teachings of the Buddha himself. It started from India and came to Japan.
A temple is dedicated to the deity Indra in the Shibamata area of Tokyo. It is a most important Indra shrine today.
長栄山大教寺のご本尊でありまして
This temple has 200,000 visitors on the New Year alone. There would be about 2 million visitors every year.
1629年
Varuna has been worshipped in many temples in Japan to prevent droughts, typhoons, and floods, which occur often in Japan. A shrine was dedicated to Varuna in the Fudono Sanctuary in Tokyo in 1836. The temple also has a representation of Kamadeva. He is worshipped by many young couples. There are many temples dedicated to Yama in Japan.
The sound of the word Yama became Emma as the name traveled and came to Japan.
変化したと言われています。
It is the most ancient temple to Lord Ganesha, which has been in use for the last 1,000 years. And young boys and girls go there to be successful in their courtship the merchants go there to gain success in their business. The oldest which has been continuously in worship for the last 1,000 years. And I don't think anywhere in the world we have a temple to Lord Ganesha who has been there in constant worship for the last millennium.
In the 7th century, Prince Shotoku created the nation-state of Japan after vanquishing his rivals. He took the term Tenno for emperor from Sanskrit texts.
And at the same time, he also wrote down a constitution for his country in 17 articles. Article 3 of the constitution clearly points out that the constitution is being based on the three ratna, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. It is the first Asian constitution ever written. The important point is that its consecration was done with a Sanskrit text which is called the Ushnisha Vijaya Dharani.
The Sanskrit manuscript used for the consecration of the constitution would have been obtained from the Hindu kingdom of Champa in Vietnam. Havan or Homa continues in Japan, where it is called Goma. Goma in the Shingon and Tendai Buddhist sects of Japan has striking parallels with early Hindu rites of Agni worship. There are also deep similarities with the later Tantric tradition. The Havan is perhaps conducted in Japan at least as often as in India. The Tantric Shingon school of Japan sings Sanskrit hymns. To this day, followers of the sect perform their worship in 1,200 temples throughout Japan.
Esoteric Buddhism is from India, and the big philosophy of the universe is, of course, from India.
Vajrayana Buddhist worship in Japan is similar to Tibetan Buddhist worship. However, the Japanese tradition has preserved some early Vajrayana rites. A study of Japanese Buddhism helps to fill some gaps in our understanding of the development of Buddhism.
There are 4 types of Shingon mantras or Fudo-myu in Japan. These are the mantras used in Japan, which are not in the Japanese language. They are taken from the Sanskrit language of India. In Sanskrit, Fudo is called Achalanatha. He seems to have his origin in the Hindu deity Shiva. The Mu is called Vidya Raja in Sanskrit. Here, it can be safely stated that Fudo Mu has his origin in the Hindu deities of India.
A sutra compares the cosmic force of the mantra with the mighty roar of a rising flood. The mantras were transcribed into ideograms, and to conserve their full power, they were also written in Siddham. Indian letters to a Japanese are sacred and stand for divine beings. To this day, the Japanese write mantras in Siddham.
我々真言宗の僧侶が
This booklet contains prayers in Sanskrit that are commonly used in Shingonshu or esoteric Buddhism. It is written in Japanese, but the mantras are in Sanskrit. It is used in many ceremonies in Buddhism. Priests learn the intonation and how to pronounce it by using this booklet, which has Sanskrit and also has Japanese letters to convey the sounds of the Sanskrit words.
今言われましたようにね、ここは
Every god has his own Bija Akshara. People also worship that Bija Akshara. Every temple gives much importance to those Bija Aksharas because they are equal to God.
いろんな仏様、神様。
スタンプを押すその Visitors bring an album. We call it Shinjin. The visitors go to various temples and collect these Siddham stamps in the albums. These albums are like holy books for the people.
ペーパーになってるのがありまして。
私たちは禅寺ですのでね。
We belong to a Zen Buddhist monastery, and we strive hard to sever the bond of birth, senility, disease, and death. The bond which is the cause of all suffering. As the Buddha said, desire is the root cause of pain in the world and should be overcome. This forms the basis of our ascetic practices, which come down to us from the Shakyamuni himself.
Bodhidharma, he transmitted Zen. Zen later has been transmitted to Japan also, and it is one of the most important sects in Japan.
Myths surround the legend of Bodhidharma. Tradition points out that he was a prince of Kanchipuram in South India. The Japanese form of his name is Bodhai Daruma. It is very close to the Tamil form, which is Bodhi Daruma. Zen was introduced in the 6th century. It was a wordless tradition, directly pointing to the human mind and the perception of one's true nature. Zen was taken to Japan in the 12th century by Isai. Its influence on Japanese art, attitudes, and language has been profound.
Zen Buddhism became very popular because it says that life is a fleeting phenomenon. And the samurai, when they went to war, they were never sure that they will come back. In this feeling, they go to war and there is no fear of death. So fearlessness in war was a very important contribution of the Zen tradition. And if you sit down, and when we sit down in a Zen monastery, you have to really do a very hard penance. And hard work in Japan is perfection. So it is the Zen tradition gave them a perfection in work, became a very important part of the modern development, perfection in everything.
初めてインドに参りました時、
When I visited India for the first time, I made sure to visit places like Nalanda University, Bodh Gaya, and also the garden bath trodden by the Shakyamuni himself. I felt happy to see the university where Tripitaka masters used to come and study during the 3rd and 4th centuries AD.
思いを寄せたわけです。
Whatever Buddhism we practice now has its roots in India. Without Indians, there would be no Buddhism in Japan.
この仏教はなかったわけであります。
インドでも日本でも
So many deities are common in India and Japan, and people are worshipping them in both the countries.
共通しているということはまさしく
The hearts of the Indian people and the Japanese people have the same base.
つながっている一つの証ではないかと思います。
Japan is the one country where Buddhism is flourishing in all its facets. Here, technology and transcendence are living together. The deep-rooted spirit of Buddha's teachings energize the Japanese people. Buddhist temples are numerous and vast numbers of people visit them every day. Besides the Buddha, so many ancient Indian deities and practices are preserved in these temples. An Indian feels quite at home in Japan.
Yes. So who would have imagined that to see the 5th century, 6th century Siddham script of Sanskrit, one would have to go all the way from India to Japan. Who would have thought that Sanskrit letters are present in almost every single home in Japan, and that too kept in the shrine room and worshipped by the people every day? Who would have thought that the Japanese alphabet itself, kana, was created upon the phonetics of Sanskrit so as to make it possible for the Japanese priests and others to be able to chant in Sanskrit till today. Amazing, absolutely amazing. The connections are so much that one would almost find it difficult to believe. But it is only we who blind ourselves. The fact is that this culture pervaded the whole of Asia. Even today, when I travel to remote parts of the Asian countries, mind you, remote parts, not the so-called modernized big cities. In these more remote parts of the Asian countries, when people see that an Indian has come, they fold their hands. A person from the land of, from Jambu Dvipa, the land of knowledge. Amazing, absolutely amazing. And why was it so? Why did it spread? It spread because there was no selfish interest. It spread only because it was philosophic. It spread, all this knowledge, all this culture spread because it took us away from the desires of the material world to that which is beyond. And everyone, everywhere, found that it brought peace to them. This mad and endless chase of materials in the world does not lead to happiness. And this is what Indian philosophy always pointed out and pointed out beautifully. We were talking about Kumarayana, Kumarajiva, and so many others. You can imagine that when Indian traders were trading across the Asian countries, across Central Asia, you can imagine what happened. In the evenings, when the day's work was done, the traders would perhaps be sitting outside, maybe next to a fire, and local people would also be gathering around them. And what would the Indian traders do? They would talk. And what would they talk about? Indians, at least till the other day, used to talk about philosophy all the time. Gardeners, domestic help, anybody used to talk philosophically all the time. And the people who heard in those distant lands, they would have responded and they would have wanted to hear more. And that is why the people, their kings, all of them wanted Indian culture. They wanted Indian knowledge because it brought them peace. This is what we should remember. This is what we should be proud of. Yes, indeed, as the film says in the end, an Indian feels quite at home in Japan. As a matter of fact, my colleague Sujata had every reason to feel very much at home. The largest milk food producing company of Japan, its products are called Sujata. And all the company employees are told the story of Sujata, who gave the sweet curd rice to the Buddha to make him break his austerities and thereby leading him finally towards enlightenment. But these are just a few examples, and the film had a few more examples. But truly, it is a very close connection. And if I were to start talking about the connections with other countries, they are no less. As a matter of fact, perhaps you should also see my film. You will find it on YouTube. Ramayana, a shared culture, with shooting in 10 countries. And you may be surprised to see that the Ramayana is practiced more often. The values of the Ramayana are spoken about more often. The day-to-day values of the Ramayana are followed, interacted, taught in schools, even more in other countries than in India. So the spread of the Indian influence is absolutely enormous. Uh, Avantika, I would be happy to take questions if there are any. Thank you.
So, looking forward to questions from the audience. First of all, thank you so much, Mr. Bell, for this most revealing film, most enlightening film, and your comments after that, your musings through your journeys and your learnings. Uh, it's incited me to go further into my own learnings, as I'm sure for the rest of our audience today. And you can be assured that this film will go far even after this moment as more and more people continue to watch it. So at this point, I'd love to invite questions if anybody has any questions. You can unmute your video and ask Mr. Bell if you have any questions. So if nobody else has any questions, I would like to ask a question. What led you into this search? What was the genesis of this journey that you have taken over so many years?
Well, it is the journey of life. It is the journey of discovery. It is a journey of trying to understand what life is about, and how art moves us and how it helps us on this journey of life. And the journey of the discovery of art, of course, for me became more meaningful from the time that I spent many weeks at Ajanta photographing the Ajanta paintings. So that was about that was 40 years ago when I spent time at the Ajanta caves, and it became my life was transformed by the compassion, beauty, and grace which I saw in those absolutely wonderful paintings of Ajanta. As far as Japan is concerned, my discovery of Indian deities in Japan began right from my first trip to Japan, which was in 1993. And in fact, I went to Japan with this feeling. Media had always taught me to understand that the Japanese are very different people. They're very different from us. They're difficult to understand. But when I landed in Japan, I found them to be, as I said before, more Indian than the Indians. The best of qualities that we tend to call Indian: warmth, hospitality, kindness, courtesy. They were way ahead of us. Their respect for elders was even much more than ours. In fact, even in 93, when I was being interviewed by the first newspaper that interviewed me in Japan, the first question they asked me is, what is your age? Because for them, age matters. And if you ask me, it is a very significant thing. So the respect for age. So my understanding of the interactions between Indian and Japanese culture, the similarities, the shared culture, began in 1993. And it's been a great journey. It's been a wonderful journey. The most important part of this journey is that it helps you to understand your own culture better. Because there's so many things that we tend to forget of our own culture. And when we see it living beautifully in another land, we become much more conscious of those things that we may stand the risk of losing in our own culture.
Yes,
And
yes.
that is where the coming together in mutual understanding and sharing of countries like India and Japan would be of enormous benefit to the rest of the world. We must also recall that discipline is a cultural value. It is through a depth of culture that a person becomes disciplined. And that is what led to the enormous prosperity of ancient India. And that is what has led to the enormous prosperity of Japan in the modern world. It is culture. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we should enormously benefit from the peace, because concentration comes from peace. There should be peace, there should be quiet. Then we can concentrate. Then we can be creative. Then we can do wonderful things. We can take our lives forward. And we must learn from the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vinay Bahl. I wish more and more people become enthused by your journey and your learnings, and indeed by the Japanese and the pure application, the pure absorption of our culture, the learning from the deities, not just praying to deities, but the learnings of the best qualities of what our deities are trying to give us through their own example. That filtration of knowledge, that purity of knowledge that still exists in Japan, I hope that many of us, younger generations, can see that, learn from that, and go forward into the future with the purest part of our culture in times to come. And I think it will be great if we can get your example, your education through your films to younger people through schools and colleges. With that, I'm afraid we do not have time for more questions at this moment. We are moving on to the next panel. But thank you so very much for your contribution at the Vedaranya Heritage and Healing Festival, in short, Vhah Fest 2021. Thank you very much for enriching the world with your film and your words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruti. It was a pleasure to speak for you. Thank you.
Hello, Jason. Hi, Katie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now.
Yeah, Gita won't let go otherwise, the phone call. So